even though it's not 5. We're not going to hear this again until the fall, late summer of 2020. So, for a final time, David.
The greatness that is continues.
It's kind of like watching your mother-in-law go off a cliff in a Cadillac. You know, you got mixed feelings.
It's a tradition that continues year after year.
I got a short memory, just like when I was in the 3rd grade. 2 of the best years of my life.
Here are Miller and Moulton's fantastic 5 picks.
Everybody expects you to win. My wife couldn't go to church with me on Sunday, and everybody said, "Where is she?" I said, "She doesn't go out with losers."
Southwest Florida's Fox Sports Radio.
Chiefs favored by 1.5 points. Over under of 53.5, I believe. I've seen the line go up to 2. I've seen it down to 1. I saw 54 for a moment yesterday. But 1.5, 53.5 are the numbers we throw out at you on this Friday morning. Mark, I am sticking with my guns. I picked the Chiefs to beat the Eagles at the beginning of the season in the Andy Reid Super Bowl. And I think that even though the Niners are more versatile, I think San Francisco has more ways to win this game. And I actually prefer the style of play of the Niners and the fact that they also can rush the passer and have a defense, much more so than Kansas City can. I think that it's tough not to take the team that has the best player on the field since the ball's going to be in his hand 60-plus times. And the Niners can't play any man-to-man against the Chiefs. The game is literally in Mahomes' hands. They're going to be zone. There are going to be holes for those speedy guys. I think it's Kansas City games to lose. I think they get off to a better start than they have in their first 2 playoff games when they've trailed by 24 and by 10 early in the second quarter of both. I like the Chiefs. Good game. Entertaining. We're going to see some scoring. 31-28 KC. They win and they cover, and the game goes over.
All right. Let me just get this done because this is a fantastic 5. I'm going with heads. Right off the bat, I'm going with heads. I am going with no spill. David Moulton stays clean for the Super Bowl. That's bet number 2. I'm going to take Kelsey to have more receptions than Kittle for number 3. And I am going to take the San Francisco 49ers to win outright. I have not been able to deviate from this over the course of a week and a half. It's where I've been from the get-go. I think they'll be able to run the ball, and no one seems to remember that Jimmy G led them to a win throwing the football against New Orleans. I don't know why this game has been completely thrown away, and all we focus on is the 8 passes that he threw in the NFC Championship game. I find it staggering. San Francisco has won every single way you can win this year. They've won with defense. They have won with offense. They've won creating turnovers. They've won not turning the ball over. Kansas City has to score a lot of points to win. And I do think this game will go over. But the fact of the matter is that San Francisco can win an over game. San Francisco can win an under game. Kansas City can't. I'm going to take the Niners. Give me the money line, lay the points. I like San Francisco.
You know, this game in this respect does remind me a little bit of when the Giants and the Broncos played the Super Bowl and everybody was talking about Elway, who it was his 4th year in the league. And he led Denver to the Super Bowl. And he, of course, had just come off the drive against Cleveland. And the talk was Elway. And Phil Simms played the game of his life, going 22 for 25 for the Giants. He was the forgotten quarterback in the game. Jimmy G is very much the forgotten quarterback in this game. Pat Kerwin, and he may repeat the stat coming up in about an hour and 10 minutes, but Pat's been saying all week on his show that the Chiefs average 34 passes a game. Jimmy G and the Niners average 30.
30.
Right. Kansas City only throws the ball on average of 4 more times a game than the Niners.
And they don't run it. I mean, we all know they don't run it the way that San Francisco does. Listen to Chandler Jones on Pat's show yesterday. And Pat said, these running backs all are kind of the same to me. Do you see it that way? And Chandler Jones like, no, they're all really different. Breda's the guy that they got the throwing game with. And he started talking about each running back and what they do well. I really enjoyed that. Chandler Jones is going to be in broadcasting if he wants to. And it's funny to listen to a D-end because he's got a little bit of a higher voice. I mean, he sounds like someone that could be analyzing damn near anything, like the ballet if he wanted to. And you'd go, well, that voice works for that. But it just, for a big D-end, he did not have this gruff, mean voice. He had more of I'm a really nice guy. But he was terrific. But talking about those running backs, and I just can't get off of the Niners. And I can't get off of the fact that they can get to Mahomes with 4.
Well, they better be able to get to him with 4. They don't
get to everybody
much.
with 4.
Well, it's true. I think 48 sacks. I think they average 3 a game. And I still think that they get their 3 sacks and lose, though. They're not going to blitz much, if at all, and they're not going to play man much, if at all. And that quarterback, the guy calling the plays, those receivers, if the offensive line for the Chiefs does not get manhandled, there's a lot of pressure on the Niners' defensive front. This kind of goes back to the first Giants-Patriots Super Bowl. If the Giants' defensive line didn't just flat out whoop the Patriots up front, the Patriots were going to win that game, and they were going to win it comfortably. I mean, San Francisco defensive line needs to be the dominant unit on the field, more so than the Chiefs' receivers.
I thought it was one of the questions I heard. Carson Palmer was asked, basically if it's Jimmy G is going to get the blame. And I didn't like his answer. He goes, well, that goes with the position. Well, but that's not the point. It's the hero or the GOAT, but that's not it. See, Jimmy G's in such a weird spot because if San Francisco wins, it's going to be because defense and they ran the ball. If they lose, it's going to be Jimmy G's fault. See, that's the problem that was the problem I had with his answer. Because Jimmy G is in a winner, in a no-win situation. Yeah, he'd win the Super Bowl. But unless he has the Phil Simms games you're talking about, David, if they win, it's going to be because they ran the ball and played defense, not because Jimmy G won it. And it is an interesting spot. By the way, back to the Brady thing to the Buccaneers that we mentioned in the end of the 6 o'clock hour. Texter sends this one. Bucks fan here. I want to emphasize that. Brady's not coming to South Florida. Love to see him and have Winston play behind him. But
yeah, that's not happening.
I know. But personally, I think he stays a Patriot. But here's the kicker, because remember I started this off with Bucks fan here. Honestly, I hope he does stay as a football fan. That is a Tampa Bay Buccaneers fan going, boy, I'd really like Brady. But the football fan in me says, God, don't send him to Tampa.
That's interesting.
That's scary.
Jamal Adams, terrific safety for the Jets, sent out a public plea to Brady yesterday. Quote, please leave the AFC East. Miller and Moulton. Lee Sterling will make his pick and or picks with the prop bets on the game coming up. Then we'll have a Niners perspective, a Chiefs perspective. Pat Kerwin in an hour. For the record, I picked Kansas City by 3. Mark picked the Niners to win. He likes them. Take the points, the money line, and we both are going over on this game, which right now is at 53.5. Miller and Moulton. Lee Sterling next. Thanks so much for being with us. Southwest Florida's Fox Sports Radio.
Kinetico, the best water you've ever had. 908-2300 or KineticoSWFL.com.
Pleasure to be joined once again on the Goldberg Noon Abraham Law Firm Hotline by Dave Wannstedt, who won a Super Bowl ring as defensive coordinator with the Cowboys, won a national championship ring as defensive coordinator with the Canes, head coach of the Dolphins, Bears, and Pitt Panthers, and for the last handful of years has been talking college and pro football for Fox. Follow Dave on Twitter at Coach Wannstedt. Coach, thanks for your time. How are you?
I'm doing great. Yes, been in Miami here since Tuesday, I guess. So things are pretty active down here. Pretty exciting, to say the least.
As a guy that did a lot with defense, and I know Kansas City brings so much, but when you're preparing for a San Francisco team that can beat you up with the run and then has weapons, how different are these two teams to prepare for as a defensive coordinator?
Well, I'll tell you what, I think that San Francisco is more difficult to prepare for this reason. They back in the day when we would play a wishbone team, for an example, it was an offense that you didn't see week after week after week. And so that was new for your players. Excuse me. And then the second thing was trying to get players on your team to give you a good picture of what you were going to see on game day was almost impossible because you didn't have those that wasn't the offense that you ran. So when I look at getting ready for San Francisco's offense, I mean, they are 2 tight ends, 3 tight ends, a fullback, and that is different. Kansas City doesn't see that very often, and Kansas City doesn't have all those personnel people. In other words, they'll be using an offensive lineman as maybe their second or third tight end. I don't know who they'll be using as a fullback, maybe a linebacker. So you don't get the practice tempo that you're going to see on Sunday. Where I think on the other side, if I'm preparing for Kansas City's offense, it really just comes down to being sound, preventing the big play, making sure that everybody is disciplined. So, hey, they're going to make some plays. Absolutely. They're going to get the ball out, but we got to minimize the plays that they make. That's the big thing with Kansas City. I think they got 3 receivers that have scored touchdowns over 40 yards or more. I mean, where San Francisco's got 1. So, I mean, there's a big difference. It's big plays versus obviously the grind it out play action offense. And I think San Francisco's tough to prepare for.
Dave, how many tricks does a 2020 defensive coordinator truly have up his sleeve, in your opinion? We always talk about during the 2 weeks, and maybe Andy Reid or Shanahan could put in a couple of wrinkles, run a couple of things that maybe have never been on tape all season. But what could you do? How much could you throw at Mahomes or Jimmy G in which they go to the sidelines and they go, we haven't seen that before. I don't know what he's doing. I mean, how many tricks do you have in modern football up your sleeve as a defensive coordinator these days?
Well, I think I'll just tell you this. We ran the same blitzes against Buffalo in the Super Bowl that we ran opening week against the Redskins, okay? And I bring up that point because I think it comes down to, in big games like this, not necessarily the team that makes the most great plays, but the team that makes the least amount of bad plays. And how do you prevent bad plays? You got to make sure that your players are thinking clearly so they can play fast. Clear mind equals fast feet, we used to say. In other words, let's make sure that we don't experiment in a game like this and end up giving up a 40-yard touchdown play, and that's the game. Let the players win the game for you. And so I think that, each one of these defensive coordinators, they got a couple new blitzes. I did too. I mean, every big game you would, but I think you got to be careful when you're going to use them and if you're going to use them, because it could impact, obviously, the outcome of the game.
When you're going into your first Super Bowl, like both of these guys are, how did you and the coaching staffs you worked with, when you look back at the first time, how did you prepare your team differently than maybe when you went back with Dallas? How different is a first Super Bowl for a team?
Well, we tried to get as much work done. In fact, pretty much, I would say 80% of the work was done in Dallas before we went to L.A. The Super Bowl was in Pasadena then. So, we wanted to make sure that because you can say what you want. When you come to, even when you go on the road and you go into a hotel, the meeting rooms are different. The training rooms are different. Your film setup is different. You all your tape and all your meetings, you're being in your facility where you can lock the door and you're going to have better focus. You're going to have better player attention and you're going to have obviously better equipment and facilities to maximize your time. So we tried to do as much as we could before we left Dallas And then when we got to the Super Bowl, we had our practices and we had our meetings, and we kind of pulled off the physicality of it, and it was more mental reps, as we say. You're still practicing, you're still having your meetings, but it's not what it was, in my opinion, at least back home.
We're talking with Dave Wannstedt, won a Super Bowl with the Cowboys, former head coach of the Dolphins and the Bears and the Pitt Panthers. Follow him on Twitter at Coach Wannstedt. When you look at Mahomes, I mean, I try not to say things that can come back and bite me, but I kind of feel, Coach, as if I'm watching Marino with mobility. And that's pretty ridiculous to say something like that, but that's kind of what I feel like I'm looking at. That this guy, he's Favre, only he's bigger. He's Rodgers, only he's even more athletic. I mean, you know what I'm getting at here, that he's kind of almost how we never, LeBron is a big Magic Johnson. I kind of feel like we're looking at Mahomes, and we've seen parts of this before, but I don't know if we've ever seen it all together.
No, I would agree. That's a good analogy. As far as, the arm accuracy and the strength that Marino had, and, he's got a lot of Russell Wilson in him. Some quarterbacks, when they start moving in the pocket, I would always say, hey, we get this guy moving, don't worry, we're going to come up with negative plays from a defensive standpoint. Some quarterbacks, like when you see Russell Wilson and Patrick Mahomes, when they get on the move in the pocket, now, and I'm not talking about running, I'm talking about when they get out of the pocket because of pressure, they are looking to make a play throwing the ball. And that's really unique. Probably half the quarterbacks that I've been associated with, when they get out of the pocket and they start moving, they cannot find receivers and anticipate what receivers are going to do down the field. So that's another big key. And if I'm playing Mahomes, I'm going to make him throw the ball on time. I'm going to make him play like Dan Marino. I'm going to keep him in the pocket. I'm going to tell my defensive ends, I don't want you guys ever coming underneath, trying to flush them out. Let's squeeze that pocket, put pressure on them, that make them throw it on time. I think that's going to be the key because, at the end of the day, he's the best player on the field. He's going to touch the football more than anyone else, right? He's a quarterback. And I would sum it up this way. He does things with the football that you don't coach. And I used to say that, playing Brett Favre every year, we would prepare for all these pass routes and all this stuff. And Brett would just do things that you don't practice for. And that's what this kid does. So, you got to try to be as disciplined as you can, and you got to really, as I said in the beginning, limit those big plays.
Well, I love your point of trying to make him play like Marino. When you do that, Dave, how do you coach then the back seven? If you're telling those ends, contain, don't move, don't let them get out, how much more pressure does that put on your back seven? And then, do you have to play a zone because you've got Hill who can beat any of their players one-on-one? How does that affect what you're doing on the back end?
You know what? I think it all ties in together because San Francisco, they're one of the least blitzing teams defensively in the NFL. They are mostly a zone team. So, the worst thing can happen is Tyreek Hill get the ball when you're one-on-one. He's going to run away from you. And San Francisco's back seven guys, as you call them, they're good physical tacklers, I believe. They don't have great speed. So, it would be a mismatch. They don't have a guy who can line up and cover Tyreek Hill, in my opinion, one-on-one over the field. Not many people can. So I think the zones, if the ball's thrown quick, you're not going to have one guy breaking on the ball. You're going to have two or three guys converging on a Tyreek Hill or a Kelsey or whoever to make the tackle. And I think that's really critical in a game like this. So because you can't double cover everybody. Everybody says, well, double cover Kelsey or double cover Tyreek Hill. Yeah, that all sounds good. That sounds good at a clinic, as I would say. If I was one of my assistant coaches said, let's just double them all. I said, okay, that's when you have the chalk in your hand, that sounds good, right? But the reality of it is it's not going to happen. So I think the zone thing helps San Francisco.
Dave Wannstedt from Fox joining us on the Goldberg Noon Abraham Law Firm hotline. Can the Chiefs stop the Niners running game? Because even when they're winning games here, their run defense has been vulnerable. You know, they shut Henry down for about a quarter and a half, but they only started to shut him down once they got the lead. Can the Chiefs' run defense hold up? Because there's a part of me that thinks, you know, I don't know if Jimmy G's going to have to throw the ball 20 times. I think they can run the ball down these guys' throat too.
Well, yeah, that the stats would say that because they have struggled stopping the run. I mean, Kansas City's defense. So, you know, the statistics would say that. I think the key is, though, if San Francisco can take.
Not really the time you want to lose, Dave.
No. You there?
3-point game. I'm here. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you kind of broke up. You said the key for San Francisco, and we lost you, Dave.
Yeah. The key for San Francisco. I'm sorry, I'm going through a appearance here in Fort Lauderdale, so I'm in the car. But the key for San Francisco is, in my opinion, with about 10 minutes, they can do that. Now, play action. Now the stress is on Kansas City's defense. But if they're playing from behind, you know, where Garoppolo's got to throw it, and Kansas City can rush the ball, rush the quarterback, and that's what happens about 90% of the times with the Chiefs. You know, they get the lead, and that changes the whole mentality of their defense.
At the end of the day, who's going to win this, Dave?
Well, San Francisco's my style. And the more I talk, it's funny. I was talking to my Fox guys yesterday. We were talking about doing our pregame show. What am I going to – and I said, you know, I think that I would give the edge because Mahomes is the best player. He's going to touch the ball. He's going to do things they don't coach. But then the more I talk about San Francisco and how they play defense and run the ball, I kind of talk myself into liking San Francisco. I like their style. I think, you know, in the end, I think Mahomes makes a few plays and Kansas City finds a way to win.
He's Dave Wannstedt of Fox. Follow him on Twitter at Coach Wannstedt. Dave, thanks for making time for us. We really appreciate it. Hopefully we can catch up soon.
Absolutely, guys. Always a pleasure. Thank you.
One of our favorite guests of all time. He's always been very good to us. He is Joe Theismann, former NFL MVP, member of the College Football Hall of Fame, member of the Redskins Ring of Fame. You can follow Joe on Twitter at Theismann7. And, Joe, are you aware that it was 37 years ago today that you won your Super Bowl?
Actually, I was. And good morning to Eminem.
Thank you.
You guys, you're now dubbed Eminem. Actually, I was. I wondered why I felt so good this morning, and then I looked at it and I thought, I know why now, because it was that long ago. I can't believe it's been 37 years. By the way, it's just amazing how time flies. But yeah, you get around this time of year and different days, things come up on the calendar of the experiences that we had.
Joe, do you remember? What do you remember about the week leading up? How confident were you? And was there a moment during the game in which you said, we got these suckers?
Well, you know, it's interesting. It really started leading up to the game. We only had 1 week in preparation because, remember, it was a strike year. Yep. And I think we only played 10 games during the season, and then we had the playoffs after that. So as soon as we beat the Cowboys, we flew right to Pasadena to get ready to play the Dolphins. And so it's almost like you didn't have time to comprehend what was about to take place. The media circus wasn't anywhere near what it is today. It was big, but it was, again, 37 years ago, it was very different from a size standpoint. And then you tried to just make it like another football game. Wednesday was preparations and practice, Thursday preparation, practice, same schedule on Friday, Saturday, and then Saturday night, it starts to hit you the magnitude of what you're about to get involved in. I mean, it's the World Championship. This is for all the marbles. Almost didn't have time to get nervous for that game. And I remember what Coach Gibbs told us Saturday night. We were having our quarterback meeting, and he said, look, we want to be within a score of these guys because we're bigger up front. We can wear them down. At the end of the game, if we need to run the football, we can handle whatever they can throw at us up front. And that's basically, you know, what the Killer Bees were. They were a great bunch of athletes that weren't as big as our Hogs. And as the game went on, getting to the football game, when I knocked the ball away from Kim Bokamper and sort of saved that situation, we knew we were going to be in a great football game with a great football team. And we wanted to stay close. That would have, I think, made it 24-13 if Kim catches that, which he still hasn't forgiven me, even though I go to his restaurant all the time in Fort Lauderdale. I want to. It's sort of my sympathy support for him. But anyway, it's as the game went on, I felt like we sort of wore him down, just with the guys up front, and of course Big John running it. And, we made a couple of plays. We made some adjustments. Joe put in a couple of little wrinkles that paid off for us. And before you know it, I'm kneeling down in the huddle looking at the guys going Super Bowl winning formation on 2. And even just saying that, I get goosebumps.
David, it's one thing I can really read into this. He does the obligatory meal at Bokamper's burger and burger joint. And then you look at his menu at Theismann's. And I mean,
we're a little different.
You think? You think?
Boy, that one pass.
I mean, one's a Super Bowl winner, and one gave the ball back to you. I don't know what to tell you, Joe.
Well, what was really funny when I stripped the ball away from him. He was in the end zone, so I stripped the ball away. He looked at me. I looked at him. It was one of those moments that just freezes in your mind and time. And I looked at him. And I went, "That was close." And I swear he wanted to strangle me. Oh gosh. But it was. I mean, there's nothing like. I mean, I think there's only been 36 or 37 quarterbacks that have been fortunate enough to quarterback a world championship football team, and now we're going to have another one added to it. One of these two young men will join the fraternity. But it's something very special to be able to lead a group of men, really lead an organization to the highest mountain you can get in our profession.
Joe, I heard you yesterday. Pat Kerwin's a friend of ours, as he is yours, and comes on the show regularly. Yeah. And so moving the chains. And I heard your appearance yesterday in which you said, because the very next year you guys make it back, you play the Raiders, and you had a bye week. You had 2 weeks off before that one. And you said, now remember, we didn't have bye weeks back then, so the 2 weeks could affect a team a lot more. And you, in fact, believe that if you guys had played the game today, the Thursday before game day, that you would have won, but that between Thursday and Sunday, you guys lost something. Now, I know both these coaches have been in this game in various roles, but most of these players haven't been in this game. Can you just, and things are different now with bye weeks, do you think the 2 weeks has the impact now that it had on your team then?
No, I don't. I think they're very much accustomed to it. The coaches are accustomed to it. The players are accustomed to it. And it really wasn't the team. Our team was – I just played a lousy football game. I was the one that Thursday I was sharp as could be, mentally, physically. I felt like I threw the ball. And then as Friday and Saturday rolled around, for some reason I lost my edge. I cannot give you an explanation as to why it felt different. Then when I got into the game, it felt different. Of course, the Raiders didn't have certain people when we played them during the season either. I mean, I don't think Howie played. I'm not sure Marcus played. They added Mike Haynes. I mean, you've got when you add a corner like that, who's a Hall of Famer, it changes things. And there were 4 or 5 plays in that game that made a difference. And I just wasn't near as sharp as I had to be. And that's the thing about our sport. We don't get 7 games. You could, in the NBA or in Major League Baseball and hockey, you can have a lousy first game and run the table and win 4-1. In our game, it's one shot. You ride the merry-go-round, the brass ring comes up, you get one grab at it, and if you're not ready, or something happens that doesn't work out your way, you may never get a shot at it again. But I do believe it's different today. That was sort of the first time they've gone to 2 weeks before. And, of course, it was a regular season. But now you have a bye week during the season. As a matter of fact, you look at teams that win the division. If you win the division, perfect bye weeks are around weeks 7 and 8 when you can get people healthy. Then you win the division and have the best record. You get another 2 weeks off. Then you play 2 games and you get another 2 weeks off. I think the one thing that these coaches have to be conscious of is keeping their team sharp. It's one thing getting them healthy. It's another thing when you play basically 2 football games in a 6-week period of time. How sharp will you be? How sharp can you be? That's why what's important about this game coming up is what the first 2 series look like. That's what I'm always watching. How are they going to come out of the gate? If they come out like gangbusters, I worry, because there's always that adrenaline depletion after. They're flying around, and it feels like your feet are in lead. But if they come out with a level pace, and that's why it's always good, I think, to come out and run the football a little bit. Let the big guys up front get sweaty, start to maul people a little bit, and get them into the game. Because the quarterback, and you want to give your quarterback a throw that he can get a completion with. You don't want to have to squeeze one in early. It's a little unnerving that way.
Could it be the same instead of squeezing one in? Is going deep the same thing even if you don't get it, Joe, where you can just let one fly? Yeah. Does that loosen the quarterback up? Because, again, you're not trying to fit it into a window. You're just ripping it.
Absolutely, and that's the thing I think Kansas City will try and do, because they've got so much speed outside. I think if it's going to be a short pass, it'll go to Kelsey. I don't see a big deep 15-yard dig, an in route. And Andy loves to throw the football. What's really interesting? We talked about this yesterday too. I talked to Brian Billick about this. You've got Andy Reid, sort of the grizzled veteran of coaches, has a wide open, spread out offense, loves to throw the football. You've got the young guy who you would expect to be that way in Kyle Shanahan, which he had down in Atlanta, spread it out, throw it around. Now he's got a football team, an offense that is basically old school. You've got a fullback. Your tight ends are very prominent in what you want to do. You basically run the football. You run a lot of play action, which is really what Mike did. So it's very interesting to see the young guy doing what the more established teams did, and the older guy, more veteran guy, he spreads it out and throws around all over the place.
Well, and the obvious comparison is, when Kyle's dad, Mike Shanahan, was with the Broncos. I mean, in a way, Joe, this game and these teams kind of match up a whole lot like when Elway and Shanahan and that Broncos team ran the ball down the Packers' throat with Terrell Davis, and it was Mike Holmgren with Brett Favre, a la Andy Reid with Patrick Mahomes, and they were spreading it out and throwing it all over the lot, and styles make a fight. If we can get a game that's 3/4 as good as that Super Bowl, but I actually think the comparison of the teams, not only with the individuals involved, I actually think that's kind of the game that we're scheduled to get here.
I think so. Barring the craziness, there's one aspect of the game people don't talk about. Obviously, San Francisco's D-line is special. Patrick Mahomes is special. I think Jimmy is special. They don't give him enough credit. Because, you look at that San Francisco 49er game. He matched Drew throw for throw. The scores were back and forth, and he led them on a big drive at the end to be able to win the football game. I really feel like the game's going to boil down. Something's going to happen on special teams. And if that's the case, I'm sort of giving the nod a little bit to Kansas City, because they've got, again, tons of speed. I don't know if Andy will let Tariq back there to return punts. It's going to be interesting to see who he decides to have back there. And here's the other thing, too. From a kickoff standpoint, with the rule the way it is now, if you kick it out of the end zone or the player gives it up, you start at the 25-yard line. But what I saw in the playoffs more and more, where the kicker's kicking it to about the goal line, about the 2-yard line, and really pinning the teams back a little bit more than the 25, making the field a bit longer. So that's just one other little element that goes along with this game. There's going to be 600 prop bets in this game. The coin toss, who'll kick first, how many field goals will be made, how many yards will Patrick Mahomes have, how many yards will Jimmy Garoppolo have, the rushing. You name it, there's a prop out there. If you can think of it, there's a proposition bet for it.
Well, and we've added a few more, Joe, because David is Troy Aikman's spotter. And, David likes food, so I have on Twitter all of my prop bets for what he's going to spill on his tie and or shirt during the game. So the bets still go up, Joe. There's no doubt about that.
How many spots? The over and under is probably 4 spots, I'm guessing.
And then the amount, Joe. And then what it is: mustard, marinara sauce, barbecue sauce.
That's right. Then you have to bring it. Are they sauces, or is it liquid? Is it coffee? Is it juice? Is it water? Is it soda? There's 4 variations right there. We've just gone through 15 props on David's presence.
Right, on his outfit all alone.
Presence alone.
Hey, you called this game. Did you spill anything when you called this game?
No, as a matter of fact, I kept everything away from me just so I wouldn't spill it because I had the chance to do it with Don Meredith and Frank Gifford. That's something people don't realize. I played in 17, played in 18, and had the opportunity to broadcast 19, which just happened to be another Miami Dolphin game against the San Francisco 49ers out in Palo Alto. I replaced O.J. Simpson in the booth in that particular football game, which was really an introduction to broadcasting for me and gave me a real flavor for what I wanted to do after the game, after I was done playing.
Think about that, by the way, if it happened today. Joe, very much an active player when that happened. All right, and they put an active player in the booth.
Jack Kemp and I were the only two active players that ever had a chance to do that.
And that was Marino's Super Bowl and his only one. And I bring that up because, we interviewed one of the guys from Kansas City, local guy we've had on a bunch, smart, good guy, and we just asked, how many do you think they'll go to with Mahomes and Reed? And he's like, they're going to go to 3 and win 2, and I think that's a fair statement. But we have Aaron Rodgers, who's only been to 1. We had Dan that only went to 1. I mean, obviously, you understand the magnitude of this, but I'm guessing Mahomes doesn't. I mean, he understands the magnitude of the game. No one's thinking of how many you're going to go to. But what advice would you give either of these guys, given the fact that, it could be their only shot at this game?
Seize the moment. Make believe that this is your one and only shot at the brass ring. Don't think about tomorrow. Don't think about yesterday. Stay in the moment and do the things that you need to do to win a football game. It's crazy. Dwayne Thomas, many, many years ago, when he was interviewed by Tom Brookshire, after the Cowboys won a Super Bowl, Tom asked him about the game. He said, "You know what? It's just another football game." It's not, but it's almost like mentally you have to prepare like you're preparing for just another game. It has so many things around it, especially today, so many distractions, so much fanfare, so many questions, such scrutiny. But the fact of the matter is when they kick it off, it's a football game. It's going to be exactly like all the others they've played, and they're going to have to play well. And I say to these young men, don't think that there's going to be a tomorrow because this football team, each of these football teams will change. So this group of men that you're playing with, these coaches, the organization, it's never going to be the same. And keeping that in mind, that's why this moment has to be special for you. I mean, the teams change. You're not going to see – think of the Buffalo Bills. 4 consecutive Super Bowls they went to with Jim and Andre and Bruce and those guys. That's unheard of. The New England Patriots winning 6, going to 9. That'll never be done again, not in our lifetime or any lifetime, because who knows what the game of football is going to look like 3 years from now. Are they going to try and legislate out the kickoff? Are they going to try and legislate out punt returns? What are the safety issues going to be? What happens after the collective bargaining agreement expires in 2020 this year? Take the moment now. Do whatever you can to win this football game now. This has got to be a now moment, not, and of course the fans would love to see it happen. And Patrick's very special, but they weren't undefeated. So somebody beat them. Now the question is the same thing with San Francisco. Somebody beat them. Now you can say these teams will probably make the playoffs, but going past that, it's a crapshoot.
Joe, you said something at the beginning of this interview, and we're talking with Joe Theismann, who, of course, NFL MVP and Super Bowl champion with the Redskins. At the very beginning of the interview, you talked about the Super Bowl that you won, that Joe Gibbs said that week, guys, if we're just within a score with them, we're fine. You were one of the first teams to actually trail in a Super Bowl and trail for a significant period of time and win the game. And even still today, coaches and teams are not nearly as patient in the Super Bowl as they are during, quote unquote, any other game. Do you think that's a big factor? The Chiefs have been behind early and often in these playoffs. Will Andy and Patrick stay as calm if they're behind 24 or 10 like they were in their first 2 playoff games? Because usually in a Super Bowl, it seems as if some panic sets in.
Well, I guess you could say a little bit of panic because there isn't another week. This is it. I mean, this is it, and then you have to live with whatever transpires in this game for the next 7 months. It's just it's a part of you for the next 7 months, and it can fester, or it can be, you can be Gronk and celebrate life forever, or you can be like other guys and just walk around kicking yourself in the rear end, wondering why and what I could have done differently. I don't see Andy nor Kyle changing their personalities, which is also interesting. Andy loves to throw the football. That's been his history. Kyle, obviously, is the acorn doesn't fall far from the tree. He loves to be able to run the football and do things off of that. Here's an interesting statistic. I looked at it yesterday. Patrick Mahomes averages 34 throws a game. That's what he averaged this year. And I thought Kyle Shanahan would be considerably less, but Kyle's at 30. So, I mean, both of them have the ability to do what they're going to do. I see maybe 6 or 7 plays in this game that would be different, but you're gonna run this game. You're going to call this game with the plays that got you here. San Francisco is going to want to run the football. You're not going to see Juszczyk just sitting on the sidelines. It's just, it's Kelsey versus Kittle. I'm curious to see what parts they play. Kelsey wasn't a big part of the last game. These two guys are important to what these teams are going to do on offense. That's where their mismatches come, in the linebackers versus the tight end situation. And obviously, San Francisco can't just rush 4, because if Patrick gets outside with all that speed, there's no telling how many big plays they're going to be able to make. On the other side of it, don't think just because in the last 2 weeks Jimmy hasn't thrown the ball a lot that he can't, nor Kyle is willing to. I think we'll see San Francisco throw it a little bit more than they have, and I think I'll see Kansas City run it maybe a little bit more than they have. Those would be the differences, I would say.
Who's going to win it?
I like Kansas City. And it's interesting. I've always believed this. And George Allen taught me this back in the 70s when I joined the Redskins. Defense wins championships. You stop the run, you run the football, you have a better chance of winning than the other guys. And I say that, and the first thing everybody thinks of is, well, Kansas City throws it around. No. This game belongs to the Kansas City defense. If they can shut down or contain San Francisco's running game, I believe their offense can make enough plays to win. And so it really is defense that's going to make a difference in this game.
Well, Joe, thanks so much for your time once again. On the way out, I'll try to slide this in. It's a small world, okay? You know somebody that my mother knows, and she ran into him literally just a week ago. His name is Larry McFinsky. He was one of the buddies of yours back in South River, right, when you were beginning your career. And in fact, the day you signed with the Redskins, I guess you were back in Jersey, and you told Larry about it. You guys played a pickup game, and Larry joked that he let you play quarterback. So Larry says
he was very nice to me. He was very nice to me, and I'm always indebted to him because it sort of set me on the road of. First of all, I believe this 100%, and so saying that I close all my presentations with, it's nice to be important, but it's a lot more important to be nice. And Larry was really nice to me. And I send my best to him as well.
Well, Joe, you've been very nice to us. We wish you all the best, safe travels, and hopefully we can talk soon.
Thanks, guys. Can't wait to get back down there. All my grandkids are down there in South Florida, so it's a great time for me when my wife and I get down to see them.
Joe Theismann, Super Bowl champion, College Football Hall of Famer, NFL MVP, longtime broadcaster, member of the Redskins Ring of Fame, kind enough to join us once again here on Miller and Moulton, and he picks the Chiefs to win.
No. This is Miller and Moulton.
It is the rare home Super Bowl for Lee Sterling of Paramount Sports, ParamountSports.com, 800-400-9741. Lee, who joins us throughout the year, Fridays at this time, and he joins us once again on the Goldberg New and Abraham Law Firm hotline, goldberg-law.com. Lee, top of the morning to you. How's your Super Bowl week gone?
Well, it was eventful. I was just taking a picture with Kamaru Usman, the MMA fighter, the welterweight champion of UFC, and then literally within like 3 minutes, he and Jorge Masvidal almost went at it. So remember a few years ago, there was two talk show hosts. Actually, it's been twice, 2 separate occasions, the last 8-10 years. But we finally had two real fighters almost go at it.
Yeah, I love those broadcast fights. There is nothing worse. I think it's not necessarily a positive, but it's a reality of Twitter that adults should never fight, because once you see a video of a drunk fight from a football game and you look at how poorly people throw punches, don't ever put yourself in that situation. I mean, the wild, long punches, at least, and nothing worse than the media guys involved in that.
What's interesting is I actually was sitting down talking to Ryan Bader for about 10, 15 minutes during one of the breaks, and he said something really interesting. He said, I asked him, I said, how nervous do you get before a fight? He says, I always get nervous. He says probably half the fighters that never make it or fail is they don't know how to channel that energy. They will use up more than half their energy during the day before they actually get into the ring. And he said that's the main thing. He says he's seen too many guys that after like 2-3 punches, they're done. So it's interesting to hear that from a fighter who gets into a cage with another man.
Well, the Niners and Chiefs have, I'm sure, felt caged up this week, and they've got to channel their energy for Sunday night. The line has not moved much. It's maybe gone up a touch in Kansas City's favor. The over-under has pretty much been the same, 53.5, right around there. Plus, you've got the hundreds of prop bets. Lee, your thoughts on Super Bowl 54?
So, great matchup. It's a matchup that I wanted to see once we got to the championship games. For that, I would obviously have preferred to see Baltimore go against Kansas City, but I like it for Kansas City, even though a lot of people, the public and also some of the sharps, are still going heavy on the 49ers. I just think Andy Reid with 2 weeks to prepare is just so good. 19-3. Now, one of those losses is the Super Bowl when he was with the Eagles, but I think he locked himself in a room for a couple of days, and I think he figured out San Francisco, one of the best play callers. He's got a defensive coordinator in Steve Spagnuolo, who did a number on New England when he was with the New York Giants and ended their 18-0 run. And just think that I'm going to go with the quarterback. For one of the reasons I went with LSU in the national championship, the main was Joe Burrow never had a bad game. Patrick Mahomes has not had a bad game this year, and I just think that he's going to be able to get himself in the moment, and I can't trust Jimmy G, who every game except for the championship game has 2 or 3 passes that should be intercepted or are intercepted.
And I love the point you're making about Andy Reid off of a bye, even though that I picked San Francisco. I've kind of had a week and a half of trying to figure out why I want to take the Chiefs and can't get there. But to me, it is the one thing about this game. And I know he lost the last Super Bowl, but he didn't have Patrick Mahomes as a quarterback, and Andy Reid has been so good throughout his career with the time to prepare. But you also have a game. This is a game with 2 exceptional play callers.
Oh yeah, obviously until Shanahan got into the second, late in the game, he just But I think he learned from it, and he took apart 2 teams. Really, the 4 teams, even though Houston started well, and then Tennessee was up 10-0. Those 4 teams that both teams played in the playoffs, really, when they played, were not very good teams. So I think we're going to see the best teams, and I think it's going to be a fun Super Bowl. It's great here. Finally, no New England Patriots.
Well, and then we'll wonder if, in fact, the dynasty is over. Probably depends on whether or not TB12 stays. There are so many prop bets within the game, catches for the tight ends, yards. There's also so many off-the-field prop bets. Curious, one, how deep do you get into the prop bets, and what are some of your favorites?
Okay, so a couple of the fun prop bets that I like. I don't do the coin toss, something like that. I'm looking for a little bit of an edge, at least. I like the national anthem. My daughter handicaps that. As you know, she's done a bunch of NBA games around the country. She's done Major League Baseball, and she knows how they set the times, and she studies each of the singers, and she's won 5 in a row. She was on the over big last year with Gladys Knight. She loved her voice and felt that she was going to string it out, and she did. She went to 2 minutes and 5 seconds when the total is like 159 or 2 minutes. This year they have it set at 203, and she thinks that Demi Lovato's going under. She said that even though the last one was over, it was in Vegas. It was more about her. They have timed it. She feels it's a minute 55, minute 57. Her voice isn't as strong. She riffs a lot more than powers through things. I'll take the under 203 in that. I like J-Lo and Shakira will both show some cleavage. At minus 250, it's Miami.
Can I ask a question on that,
Yeah.
Lee? I am very, very confused about this question. How much cleavage counts as a win? I mean, do we have to show a nipple? I mean, what the hell is this?
Funny, I was talking about my two daughters, and they're like, don't volunteer to be the judge.
Right.
Someone's got to do it, but they're not going to let you play more than 100, 200 on something like that. And then some of the regular prop plays, I like my best is longest penalty over 15.5 yards. I think you'll see one of the DBs have to take a chance and hold someone or doesn't want to get beat for that touchdown, and he'll get called there at over 15.5 yards. I also like George Kittle over 70 receiving yards. I don't think Honey Badger can guard him. And will there be a sack or a touchdown first? I'm going to go with a sack. So it should be a lot of fun. Anyone wants to get in touch with me, we do college and pro basketball also on a great run there on a 11-3 run. So they want a 11-3 run actually in basketball right now, and since January 2nd in football. It's all available at ParamountSports.com. And where it says free pick sign up, just put in your email address. We'll send you a free selection every Friday night. We're 12 and 6 on those since the start of football season.
He's Lee Sterling, ParamountSports.com, 800-400-9741. Lee, all the best to the family. Enjoy Sunday, and thanks for being with us all year.
Well, let's circle back up the Tuesday or Wednesday before the March Madness. Okay?
That'd be
Sounds
great.
good.
See you guys. Thanks.
Lee Sterling. You can also follow him on Twitter at Paramount Sports. And without further ado, Jennifer Lee Chan, who covers the Niners for NBC Sports Bay Area, is kind enough to join us. You can follow Jennifer on Twitter at Jennifer Lee Chan. Jennifer, good morning. How are you?
Good morning. How are you guys doing?
Well, we are doing fine. What kind of a week has it been for the Niners? Do they feel as if they've practiced well? I've been curious about following their injury list all week, and that they've got 3 players who have been limited at best. How has the week gone for the Niners?
The word out of Niners camp is that it was a little bit of lackadaisical practice last week, but once they got to Florida, they've gotten really good practices in. And the limited guys are just guys who they're taking it easy on. They're going to play on Sunday, but it looks like everybody's ready and dialed in for the game.
This is an interesting game in that it's been Mahomes, and Jimmy G's going to hand it off. It seems that everybody has forgotten how well this guy's played all year, in particular in the game against New Orleans. One of the reasons I like San Francisco is that the Niners can win several different ways, but it certainly seems that it's being made out to be that Jimmy G can't win it. How do you think he handles that?
You know, he's been the same since he's gotten into the facility the first day from New England. He has been very even-keeled. He's very kind of reserved and calm, and he's done a great job. I mean, I think the narrative about Kansas City being super fast has been kind of, what you've heard all throughout the week. And I think if people watched the beginning of the season where they handed off the ball a lot and, he was coming back from the ACL injury, and then you watch the playoffs, I think that's why people think that he can't throw the ball. But just like you said, New Orleans, Baltimore, there are a lot of games where he threw a lot of yards, and he almost threw for 4,000 yards this season. So I don't know exactly where that is coming from other than the fact that they just only watch the playoff games, because he really can throw the ball well.
Jennifer, he made a comment this week in which he said it was the Arizona game on Halloween night in which things started to come together, which I found interesting because I thought things actually came together for him late in 2017 before he got hurt in early 2018. But what did he mean by that? And since you followed this team all year, all right, what was he referencing that the Arizona game on a Thursday night on Halloween night, and that was the night where it clicked?
Well, that was kind of the debut of Emmanuel Sanders being on the team, and really his arrival. While it's not necessarily him being there, it's just that extra piece that it was added to the offense, where it really did kind of turn things around. I mean, you saw guys like Deebo Samuel, who, as a rookie in Kyle Shanahan's offense, it's really hard to be super productive at the beginning of your career that way. A lot of the rookie receivers, tight ends, skill position players say that it takes a good year to be in his system to really kind of get it and know where you're going. And, the play calls that get dialed in, it's a lot of verbiage. It takes a lot to kind of process and digest it and know where you're supposed to be. Emmanuel Sanders got there, really kind of had an effect immediately on the wide receivers. It changed things where you couldn't have that extra guy covering George Kittle because you had to cover Emmanuel. Prior to that, those younger receivers weren't as productive, so it really kind of changed things around and really made the offense more productive.
When this defense has been so good all year, we know that. How different, if any, will they play? Everybody's wondering if they're going to blitz more. They've gotten to every quarterback with 4, but Mahomes is not every quarterback, and he's better when he leaves the pocket. So how do you expect the Niners defensively to adjust, if in any way, to how they play Mahomes differently than how they play any other game, Jennifer?
I mean, they did play quite a few mobile quarterbacks this season. They played Kyler Murray. They played Russell Wilson twice, and Lamar Jackson. So they've got accustomed to playing mobile quarterback. I don't think they're going to do a whole lot differently at the beginning. I think that their kind of motto for the entire Super Bowl 2 weeks of prep is that they're doing everything just like they normally would. So everything, the routine stayed the same, the times of their practice stayed the same, the length of their practices are the same. So I really don't think they're going to vary from their normal operating procedure. So I think they're going to go out there just as they normally have. I mean, you've got Nick Bosa on one side and Dee Ford on the other, and the two twin towers in the center, DeForest Buckner and Eric Armstead, are 6'7", and they're both right next to each other in the center. So I really don't think they're going to do a whole lot differently getting to him. I think they're going to kind of go in there and see what exactly he's going to be able to do. Not that they don't know, but, see what the game plan is and then adjust towards that.
She's Jennifer Lee Chan, covers the Niners for NBC Sports Bay Area. You can follow Jennifer on Twitter at Jennifer Lee Chan. That's Jennifer Leechan. Kyle Shanahan's been in this game before as an offensive coordinator. There's very little about the Niners players or coaches that have experience in this game, but he does, and it was an overtime game at that. Has he talked at all about the benefit of having gone through this as a coach? And I understand it was only as an OC, but, somebody here has got to have some experience in this game and helps, and he seems to be the guy. Has he talked about that at all this week?
Yes, I think the biggest thing that he pointed out is that he knew what the obligations were going to be like for the team. I mean, you come in and you're immediately thrust into the media spotlight, and I think that really helped with the planning. So they prepared like they were going to play last Sunday. So the game plan went in, the install went in, and they have been ready since last Sunday. So he's been able to kind of tweak the system, take some plays out that they didn't like, put some more in that they did. And so this week has kind of been just a little bit of kind of a tinkering session. Everybody is, more confident in the game plan. He said he wished that he had an extra week before every game. And it's been, everybody's calm, everybody's prepared. So it's really helped out. So I think really just the experience of what the media obligations are for the team, knowing how that works, really kind of helped him prepare the team and get ready for this week.
All right, I got to deviate here, Jennifer, because I didn't read your bio before we had you on. I'm like, beat writer for the Niners. This is easy. It's the Super Bowl. I don't need to know what her bio is. We're talking Niners. And then I read it, and I see former professional wrestler. This interview is going completely in a different direction the minute I saw that. I need to hear more about this. Not too many times do we go from the field of professional wrestling to beat reporter for a team. So can I just ask, how were you approached? How did the wrestling thing happen?
Well, I was doing some commentating, some color for a show called Pro Beach Hockey, which is on ESPN. It was a kind of a roller hockey that had ramps on the ends.
As someone who broadcasted roller hockey, Jennifer, I remember it well.
Yes. So the producer for that show approached me, said, I've got a great opportunity for you. You should audition for my wrestling show. And, you hear that and you're like, yeah, okay. And so I went to the audition. He's a very nice guy. And I ended up being a part of the show. My character name was Jade, and we were nationally syndicated on UPN for a year. And then it went on hiatus for a little bit. Then we brought it back. And we did a few live shows in Vegas, which they cut up into a couple seasons of digital episodes. And then I retired not too long after that. I have bonded with George Kittle because he's a huge wrestling fan. So, it's definitely a conversation starter for sure.
Well, you mentioned Kittle, and, here's a guy who spent the whole NFC Championship game blocking. And and the Niners have a bunch of guys who they could really not be a part of the game plan one week and then be the focal point the next. Curious as to the player on the Niners that you think ends up being the guy in this game.
It's really hard to go into a game where Kyle Shanahan is the head coach and know who exactly is going to be the playmaker for the game. I mean, those guys have been interchangeable. Sometimes it's Tevin Coleman, sometimes it's Matt Breida, and then Raheem Mostert's been huge for the team towards the end of the regular season. He had a calf cramp the last game, so Tevin Coleman was the guy who really kind of was the hot hand and carried the ball more. So it really kind of just depends how the game unfolds. That's who kind of is going to get all the carries. But really, those guys, all of them, have been super productive for the Niners.
Absolutely, and it is. How much did Sanders help Samuel? It just seems that Samuel was not a guy we heard a lot of, and then the trade happens for Sanders, and it seemed to open up time for Samuel. Is that an accurate statement?
I think it is. I think that was a turning point for a lot of the guys. I think it was a turning point for Kendrick Bourne as well. He really kind of brought that veteran presence into the locker room, and what's great about them is that, with all of his experience in the league, he says, Kendrick Bourne and Deebo Samuel, who are always dancing around the field, dancing around practice, those guys keep him young, and he's also learned from them. Deebo Samuel is one of the best guys with the ball in his hands. He runs through the ball. He stays kind of low and heavy to the ground, which, keeps him from getting tackled. He's kind of got that same thing as George Kittle does, with yards after catch. They both lead the team in yards after catch, and Emmanuel Sanders has kind of learned from him and Kendrick Bourne doing that a lot more. And they've just got a really nice balance in that wide receivers room. Emmanuel Sanders said it's a really nice ecosystem that they have.
Jennifer, appreciate your time and your insight, particularly at this hour. Have a great weekend and safe travels, and hopefully we can do this again.
Thanks so much for having me on. Have a great day.
Jennifer Lee Chan, who covers the Niners for NBC Sports Bay Area. You can follow her on Twitter at Jennifer Lee Chan, which is Jennifer Leechan.
Pro wrestler?
Yes.
Pro wrestler? Like I said, most of the time when we have someone on, I'll spend 5 minutes and figure out who they are, what they're about. But literally, the day before the Super Bowl, or the show before the Super Bowl, we've got a beat writer on from the Niners. I know what we're talking about. So I didn't bother to look, and I'm like, I'm getting her picture for the YouTube and the Twitch feed, and I'm like, she's a pro wrestler, or was a pro wrestler. Thank goodness I didn't get that from the beginning. I'd have ruined that interview right from the get-go.
I love how she said that, it makes for good inroads with a couple of the players because they, too, are big wrestling fans.
Oh, yeah. I'm telling you, the street cred she has off of that, let's be honest. One, she's a very attractive young lady, so that's not going to hurt walking in an NFL locker room. I'm telling you, that pro wrestling thing vaults her into the conversation. It gets her to the sit-downs, if you know what I mean. She becomes one of the guys when it's pro wrestling.
Jennifer Lee Chan, kind enough to join us here on Miller and Moulton. For the record, in the prop, Kittle against Kelsey, I'm going to go Kelsey. More catches, more yards.
Yeah, I am too. I'm with you.
All right.
That was my pick.
Right. And that was your prop bet. You'll take Kelsey in the prop bet over Kittle. But I have the Chiefs winning. Mark has the Niners winning. We both have the game going over. The over is 53.5. So figure it out accordingly. It is a pleasure to welcome one of the nicest guys you would ever want to meet. He began his Southwest Florida television career doing sports for Fox 4. Then he moved on over and did news for ABC 7. He parlayed that into becoming the main news anchor at KMBC Channel 9 in Kansas City. You can follow Len Jennings at Len Jennings KMBC. Len, how the hell are you?
I'm great, Dave. It's fantastic that you reached out to me, and I'm so excited to be on the air in Fort Myers. Actually, when I was flying in, I kind of looked out my window and I saw the Fort Myers coastline. I kind of got chills. I said, I recognize that coastline anywhere. So it's great to be back in Florida, and obviously it's been great. It's great to be covering the Super Bowl this weekend.
Well, I mean, yeah, Len, you're a news guy now, but you, as David said, you started in the sports world. The three of us go way back to when you were here. It's got to be fun for you to be able to do the sports thing again. I mean, I know you're, like I said, you're the news guy now, but to be able to go back into sports and to do it for the Super Bowl, we've had Soren Petro on a couple of times. I mean, you're involved in a city right now that is just, it's always been all Chiefs all the time, but just how big is the buzz, Len?
Well, and just I'm back in sports. Probably about 4 or 5 years ago, I moved over as a sports director of the TV station. So I'm back in sports, and so it's been a wild ride for me since then, because they had the Royals back in 2015 win the World Series. And I'll talk, the city was blue, all blue when the Royals in 2014, 2015. You notice a huge difference. Everyone's in a good mood. And then the same thing happens this time around. Everyone is red every single day. You see it everywhere, Chiefs logos, and people have just been in a fantastic mood the whole season. Well, pretty much ever since they drafted Patrick Mahomes, everyone's been in a great mood. But it's just been an amazing ride for this Chiefs team, but also for the city of Kansas City. It's kind of a mid-market in central United States and in the Midwest, and so this is you get that Midwest nice, and they're Midwest nicer because the Chiefs are doing so well.
Len, what's it like having one of the biggest superstars in sports at the beginning of his superstardom and to be covering Patrick Mahomes? I mean, you could argue that Kansas City's never had this, although George Brett around 1980 in the early 80s was a really big deal in the sports world. But I mean, Len, you're getting to cover Patrick Mahomes at the beginning of his career, and this could be the face of the league for the 2020s.
Well, what's interesting is like the Kansas City Chiefs, before they drafted Patrick Mahomes, they had a pretty good team. They had Alex Smith at quarterback. They had a AFC divisional playoff game at home. They lost to the Steelers, I think, by about 2 or 3 points. They were so close to the AFC championship game. They had a couple of first-round picks. I think the chatter was that all they needed is like maybe one guy on defense, one guy on offense, and they could take that next step. And so what the Chiefs do is they traded 3 of their picks, 2 of their first-round picks, to move up in the draft to grab a quarterback. And so everyone was kind of scratching their heads. Is like, I guess maybe they don't like Alex Smith enough, or they don't think that Alex can win the game. And they bring in Patrick Mahomes, and then you start hearing what he sat out for that first season. And Alex Smith was an integral part in his growth, and he gives a lot of credit to Alex Smith. To this day, he actually gives Alex Smith a lot of credit for being in the Super Bowl here. And then all of a sudden, you start hearing from guys like Travis Kelce and Tyreek Hill about what this kid is doing in practice. And he's not even playing the game. He sits the first season under Alex Smith's tutelage. And then all of a sudden, you start hearing some things like, man, this is Patrick Mahomes. They're just praising him in the practice. And then when he first he started one game at the end of the season against the Broncos and looked good. And then all of a sudden, just that next season when he kind of came out, got his first season as a starter, when they traded Alex, and then Patrick Mahomes took over. You started hearing more during the OTAs, during the camps, and then we started seeing it. His second season, when he did his MVP season, 50 touchdown passes, and everything what he was doing was no-look passes, left-handed passes, And that's when the excitement started to build, and I think that's when everyone started talking about this guy's going to win us Super Bowls. And of course, Chiefs history, they haven't won one since Len Dawson 50 years ago in Super Bowl IV. So this has been a long time. They haven't played in the Super Bowl since then either. So and there's huge fanaticism in Kansas City for Chiefs football. Everyone loves Chiefs football, and so this is just huge for Kansas City. And this being the beginning of Patrick Mahomes that drafted him with a number 10 pick until now, and the kid is just he's 23, 24 years old. He's extremely mature for a kid his age. And he grew up in his dad was a Major League Baseball player. He grew up in clubhouses, and I think that helped him a lot. I mean, his parents are grounded, and growing up in clubhouses and seeing how people, professional ball players act, he's got that maturity that so he's phenomenal on the field, but he's also just phenomenal off the field as well.
And Lenny's phenomenal off the field for Kansas. I mean, this early in your career to be asked questions, and who knows what's going to happen down the road, but I mean, he gets it. Every answer seems to be the right answer. I want to play in Kansas City my whole career. I mean, every time he's put in front of a microphone, it seems that he knows what to say. And I know that sounds really simple, but it's not. We watch, I mean, we got Jameis Winston up the road. Talk about a guy that doesn't know what to say in front of a microphone. He can trip over himself even when he shouldn't have to.
Right.
It's remarkable that Patrick gets it.
And then you're right, Mark. It's funny about him is because I don't think there's anyone really kind of guiding him. Sometimes these players, they have people, they'll say one thing and then they'll come out and say the next thing. And you think, well, someone probably got in his head, either his agent or his coach or whatever. With Patrick, I don't think he's taking direction from anyone. I think this is from all him. And he's very genuine. He handles himself in a great. And the thing about it is, it has an effect, on the players. I mean, Travis Kelce was getting these unsportsmanlike penalties that were just killing the Chiefs a couple years ago, because he just couldn't control his behavior on the field. And Travis Kelce, you almost see a little bit of a difference in him on the way he acts on the field and his maturity. And I think, when you talk to Travis, he just kind of felt like, I got this kid next to me who's going to win us a Super Bowl, and I better get on board with this. And that's where it trickles down for Patrick Mahomes. It starts with him, but I think he has a huge, huge impact on the players around him as well.
Len Jennings, former news and sports guy in Southwest Florida, now doing the sports thing after doing the news thing at KMBC Channel 9 in Kansas City. Follow Len on Twitter, Len Jennings, KMBC. Well, how big of a story is it in Kansas City, the interview that Sammy Watkins gave in which he said, I don't know what I'm going to do next year. I may take the year off and heal up for all I know. Because Sammy has been a big part of the last two playoff runs. He's been a bigger part of the playoffs than he has necessarily in the regular season. I think he's going to have a big game. I think it could be similar to the game he had against Tennessee coming up Sunday night. How is the Sammy Watkins interview going over? How surprising was it to you?
I think doesn't surprise me. I actually had a nice conversation with him about 2 or 3 days ago, and we sat down and we chatted. And first off, we always talked about his South Fort Myers day, this quarterback Dallas Crawford, and how he played in South Fort Myers. But we were talking about Sammy and asking him, because he's just one of these guys, and a lot of the guys, he's like, listen, there's so many guys on here, there's so many playmakers on here who can do the job, that he just comes out and he does his job. Even Andy Reid thinks his high praises, just calling him. He's like he should be a Pro Bowl player, but he just doesn't have the stats. He goes out, and he works hard every single day, and he's one of those guys that doesn't take a play off. And you can't take a play off with Patrick Mahomes. You never know if you're going to get the ball or not. But he's very unselfish. He comes to work. He plays hard. He admits that I think back in his Buffalo days, he was extremely selfish and disappointed about things, and he knew he had to change things, and he seems to embrace that role here in Kansas City. But I think that Sammy Watkins, where he's saying, well, he's not going to be, doesn't know what he's going to do next year, I think it's just kind of part of his laissez-faire attitude sometimes, and just not knowing what's going to be for the future. He was probably just completely honest about things. But I'd be surprised if I know Andy Reid kind of talks to Sammy about how much he appreciates him and how much he holds him in high regard. And I know that he gels very, very well in the locker room. So, I don't know what to make of exactly what the future is for Sammy Watkins, but it doesn't surprise me that he says it.
Obviously, it's Mahomes, it's Hill, it's Kelsey, it's Watkins, it's the offense. But early in the season, this defense struggled. They've figured it out, but they are, that a lot of talk's been on Jimmy G. Can he win? And they throw it 30 times. The Chiefs throw it 34. I don't know how much talk's been made about the Chiefs' defense and what they have to do, but, this game's not going to be lost by Mahomes to me as much as it would be lost by the Kansas City defense. What do you think when you look at their defense and the way the Niners run it, because they've been susceptible to the run? I know the Chiefs have gotten better, but defensively, what worries you about Kansas City Sunday, Len?
It's interesting because the defense has really kind of turned a corner, and it was funny because Steve Spagnuolo is the defensive coordinator. His first year as the defensive coordinator here. He was also the defensive coordinator in 2007 for the New York Giants, and they started I was talking to Michael Strahan the other day, and he was sharing this with me. They started 0-2. They gave up 80 points in the first two games, and they went on and they won the Super Bowl that season because it was all about Spags and trusting his process. And after they played Tennessee in the regular season, the Kansas City Chiefs this year, they got demolished. I think Derrick Henry rushed for like 225 yards all over them. And ever since then, I think they gave up more than 100 yards, I think maybe twice since that time. So they've held everyone under 100 yards since then, including the two games in the playoffs. So I think whatever it was, they figured something out on stopping the run because they've been doing extremely successful. And then that secondary, Tyrann Mathieu, many argue he should be up for Defensive Player of the Year. And, he got kind of the Pro Bowl snub, but he's been a leader as well for the defensive side of the ball. Huge impact. So I just, as far as what I'm worried about, is if that defense can continue to stop the run because, that's going to be trouble if they, and I'm not sure, I don't know the latest status on Tevin Coleman for the San Francisco 49ers, but you saw what Raheem Mostert did a week ago Sunday for the 49ers, and who's the other guy, Matt Breida. So that probably worries me the most is if they can continue to stop the run because you should see that early on. If all of a sudden the 49ers are getting like 12, 8-yard gains right off the bat, that's when I'll probably get a little bit worried.
Len, how have the Chiefs handled this week? We had someone on last hour talking about the Niners, and she said, to be honest, the Niners feel as if they've had a better week in South Florida than they had in their week of prep back in San Francisco. Your read and or what some of the Chiefs have said about the week in South Florida. We had Joe Theismann on yesterday. He said, sometimes you can lose your edge in the week that you're actually at the game. How do you feel the Chiefs have handled this week?
Well, I think that, with head coach Andy Reid, he's always been kind of very regimented. For every single road game, they arrive at the same time, no matter what time zone they're playing in. That's how regimented he is. He arrives on the same day. Mexico City, when they played in Mexico City, they arrived 3 o'clock in the afternoon on the Saturday or the Sunday before the game and played it, whereas the Chargers were down there trying to get acclimated to the altitude. And so he's very regimented. And so when you talk to the guys about it, it's just, Andy Reid kind of sticks to his guns about what the practice schedule is. Our pressers here were 8 a.m. for the Chiefs every morning. And I don't think that's by accident. I think he wants to get these guys up out of bed and get them going to start the day. So we had really early pressers in the morning to talk to these guys. And, when you talk to the guys, they talked about how Andy's kind of got them on the schedule. He's like, hey, let's just he always likes us to have, to have our personality, have some fun. But at the same time, we have a duty. And then the other big thing about Tyrann Mathieu and Patrick Mahomes, you got two leaders on both sides of the ball. Tyrann Mathieu was telling us that he's texting all like the young kids, the rookies and young players. He's texting like, "Where you at? Where you? Oh, I know where you are. Because if you're not back at your hotel, we have a problem." And so you got some of the veteran players and some of the leaders, also kind of taking some accountability as far as where these guys are. So I have the feeling that not sure how practice has been going this week for the guys. We're not allowed to attend the practices, but just talking to them. It seems, it appears that they're grounded and they're focused. But Coach Reed even mentioned that they got most of their work done last week in Kansas City. So this week is kind of like still football on top of football, but also with the responsibilities and distractions and trying to be focused on the task at hand.
If there's an unsung hero for Kansas City, we all know who the heroes are supposed to be, but Len, if it's somebody else, who would be your pick for the wild card unsung hero of this game from Kansas City?
That's a great question. Unsung hero. Let's see. I'd probably say the offensive line. They probably don't get as much credit as everyone else because you got a bunch of guys on there. You got Mitchell Schwartz. You have Laurent Duvernay-Tardif, the doctor, and you have a couple of the other guys, Andrew Wiley, and they've just been, and Eric Fisher, who was a number one draft pick back in 2013. So you have some guys that have been together, playing together for about 4 years, and the offensive line about 5 years ago was a weakness for the Chiefs. And they kept rotating and signing players, cutting players. They just couldn't find the guys that clicked and worked together. And they all of a sudden got a good group and good guys. And Andy Reid, who's an offensive lineman guy himself, says this is probably one of the smartest offensive lines that he's ever coached. It doesn't help to have a doctor on that line, but so I think the offensive line is probably the unsung heroes of this team.
Yeah, I think the Chiefs' tackles are the keys, actually. If they have a good game and block the Niners' ends, I think Kansas City is going to win. Len, all the best. Thanks for making time for us. We really appreciate it. Enjoy your weekend. Never know when you're going to get to cover another one of these, and safe travels back to America's Heartland.
Hey, guys. Hey, thanks for having me on. It's great to catch up. And, Dave, I think I saw a picture of your daughter, and I still think she's like 8. So and we grow up and we get old. So I'm like, who is this person? I can't be his daughter. But
she's married, Len.
Great.
His daughter is married. That. I mean, just let that sink in of how old the three of us are, Len.
Oh my goodness, it's crazy. Yeah, but it's a joy. I enjoy chatting with you guys. And it's a shout out to Fort Myers. I miss everyone there. It's a great place to live, and I hope everyone has a great day.
Len,
thanks, Len.
We really appreciate it. Be well.
You too. Thanks, guys. Bye now.
Len Jennings, KMBC, Channel 9 in Kansas City. Follow him on Twitter, Len Jennings, KMBC. I picked the Chiefs, took them at the beginning of the year, kind of wavered during the course of the last week and a half. I do think the Niners have more ways to win this game, and they're more versatile, but I'm sticking with Mahomes, 31-28, so that's a Chiefs win and a Chiefs cover and an over. Mark did not give a score, but he did say he's taking the Niners and he's taking the over. So we are split on Super Bowl 54. Is Pat with us?
Yes.
Pat Kerwin. He's been busy this week on Radio Row with SiriusXM's NFL Radio, moving the chains. He's got a couple more shows before kickoff. Pat joining us once again, courtesy of Pinchers. Pat, how's your week gone?
Well, it's been great, you guys. It's tons of interviews and time with the teams and all that stuff. And weather's been great, and we had one cold day, but otherwise it's been terrific. And we expect a large crowd today over at the set. And they said you don't even need to bring your notebook. You're going to interview straight through for 4 hours, one after another. So there's always information. I'm trying to drag football information out of these people, the ones that can give it. And yesterday I had a very interesting conversation with Harrison Smith. Remember, Kansas City beat Minnesota without Mahomes. And as much as I think Mahomes is absolutely fantastic, that rang a different bell for me, that there's other guys on the team that need to be recognized. And you always think, well, can they get the ball to Hill without Mahomes? They were able to do that quite well against the Vikings. So that conversation of all the ones I had yesterday helped me clarify where I was headed with this game pick.
Well, I only caught one of your conversations, and it was with Chandler Jones. And one, that guy's got a future in broadcasting if he wants, because he was a great listen. But it was interesting when he was talking about the division, and he gave me more reasons to take San Francisco, because the fact of the matter is that the Niners have played this type of quarterback more than anybody in the league. I mean, with Russell and with playing against Arizona, they are used to at least playing mobile quarterbacks. How much of an advantage do you think that gives the Niners, if any, Pat?
It does help them. Richard Sherman and I had that conversation the night before, and he pointed out what you just pointed out, 2 against Murray, 2 against Wilson, and 1 against Lamar. So they've had to game plan 5 times for a quarterback who could beat you with their feet if they want to. It was interesting in those 5 games, the quarterbacks rushed 43 times for 284 yards against San Francisco, 6.6 yards a carry, 25 first downs. But they did sack those quarterbacks 14 times. So, and I think their record was 2 wins, 3 losses. No, 3 wins, 2 losses, against them. So Richard's point was we've had different plans, but we've had to deal with these kind of guys. And I said, yeah, but here's the difference. This guy is a deep thrower off the scramble. And he's also a retreater, which the other guys really aren't. I talked to Russell about it yesterday. Russell doesn't like to retreat. Russell knows where his escape lanes are, and he'll step up and slide out of B gap or finagle his way out to C gap. But this kid will keep dropping because he's ready to throw the ball even if he's 14, 15 yards deep. So a little different, but clearly Sherman thought we're dusting off some of our principles to get ready for these athletic, this guy because we've done it before.
NFL Radio's Pat Kerwin, kind enough to join us once again, courtesy of Pinchers, from Tampa to Key West and many points in between. Pinchers, because you can't fake fresh. Pat, I don't know if I'm right with this, but I thought when I was a young guy and I was reading up on sports that I thought the zone defense in the NFL was essentially created to stop Bob Hayes, that it was created to stop speed. Yet nowadays we think of it as, boy, the zone, there's going to be holes in it. Speedy guys will be able to find their spots, run through it, yards after catch, etc. Your thoughts on the Niners, almost exclusively a zone team matching up against the speed of the Chiefs at receiver. Is that a good thing, or is that going to be a problem?
I think it's a necessary thing. They'll try to do some other things, but in general, I think when the game ends, and we record their zone calls, it'll be 90% zone. So let's go back to Bob Hayes for a historical statement here, from me anyway. So when they had to deal with Hayes, like dealing with Tyreek Hill, that did bring in the zone defense. The problem is today, when Hayes was doing it, at the most they had 3 receivers released, right? The tight end and 2 wideouts. That was it. And so filling up those voided areas with eligible receivers, that really wasn't what was going on in the NFL. Now they're going to release 5, and there are cracks and holes in it. And if you're going to play cover 3, and Robert Saleh is a real disciple of Pete Carroll, so that means there's only 4 underneath guys. And if you start looking at 4 players, you don't have to be a football fan to understand this, you guys that are listening, but 4 people have to handle the width of the field, and that opens up huge cracks in the curl areas and maybe in the flat if they want to cheat and squeeze the curl area. So when you have a tight end like Kelsey and you've got a running back like Damian Williams and obviously Watkins, I went back and looked at, okay, let's see, they have an 8-game winning streak going on, and Tyreek Hill has not done very much in this. And so you start asking yourself, everyone seems to understand that they got to handle Tyreek Hill. So Tyreek Hill hasn't had 100 yards receiving in 8 straight games, yet they've won all 8 games. Well, that scares you a little bit more, too. So if you build a defense and then a lot of quarters and 4 across, et cetera, and you start handling Tyreek Hill, then what are you giving up? Well, it turns out you're giving up Sammy, Watkins, and Hardeman. And those guys have had like 40 receptions coming into this in this 8-game winning streak. So Mahomes knows where else to go. And so I think they have to play zone because of the speed on the field, and they're absolutely concerned about it. But this quarterback has seen this all year. That's the problem. He's got maybe 12 games of someone trying to do it this way, and he clearly understands how to beat it. You go back to the Tennessee game, the one I was on the sidelines, they were so committed to zone, they were playing 3-man rush and putting 8 in coverage because of the 5 receivers, and they still couldn't handle it. So at the end of the day, I think my man Mahomes sees what he sees, and he sees it a lot, and he understands where to go. And I think San Francisco should realize, man, if we take Hill away, he's got too many places to go. So they're going to have to do some cheating along the way. And they're not a blitz team. Yet when they do blitz, which is limited, they've been very effective because I don't think people prepare for them to blitz. I think they realize that they're a four-man rush team and that's what we're going to get. But at the end of the day, the couple of times that they've decided to get after it, and they have, here's the example. They've had 123 blitz calls all year. And from that 123, they got 15 sacks out of it. So they're getting a sack every 8 or 9 pressure calls. So I think as crazy as it sounds, they got to do it a couple times and try to tag this guy before he starts drifting around.
Pat, is that then the case if you're the defensive coordinator, based on what you just talked about? Would you then blitz a lot more early so the thought of blitz is there for the rest of the game, or is that something you're going to wait and see what they're doing to see how you attack and blitz?
Well, first thing is early will mean first downs for me. Early in the game, a couple of times, just enough that they go off the field and start thinking about what they just saw. Because you can always invent a blitz you've never used before. And if it's not effective, you're going to get scored on. But if it is effective, and Jim Miller makes this point all the time that, he would only zone blitz. The old Jim Johnson defense where you're playing 3 deep and blitzing in front of it and probably voiding an underneath area, which I think would be the way I'd go with it. But if you just look at first downs, interestingly enough, Kansas City is 211 runs, 245 passes. So they've thrown more on first down than they've run. And I think you got to address dealing with that all the way. And then it gets worse from there. Second down is 119 run, 203 passes. So I think you can do it a couple times. You're not going to win doing it, and you're not going to make a living doing it. But you've got to take some shots to sack this quarterback. He doesn't turn the ball over very much. There's another Mahomes-ism. He doesn't throw picks, and he doesn't really fumble. So you got to take a shot or two. They're going to probably try to think they can rush inside, but the two talking to those guys, he drifts back all the time. So as Buckner said to me, he goes, it's a long way to get him when you're rushing inside. He's not a standing there. Like Garoppolo's going to throw from 4 yards deep in the pocket, maybe 5 yards deep. He's going to sit in there, and that's his launch point. The other guy could be all over the place. So I think he kind of neutralizes the inside rushers, the way he moves around back there. They're going to need Bosa and B to get there once in a while. But I do think you should help with a pressure call early.
Pat, is that kind of the X's and O's game for the Niners defensive coordinator there? He's got to get his ends one-on-one on the tackles with no help and then say to those guys, hey, dudes, you got to be able to win this. If you don't win this, we don't have a shot. And so does that mean maybe, I remember Spags with the Giants, he would send Antonio Pierce up the middle quite a few times just to occupy a blocker so that Strahan and Umenyiora and what have you could just be one-on-one on the ends. Is that kind of the game within the game here? Just blitzing to get his ends solo and no help?
Yes, I think that's the game. You got to design stuff inside. The two big guys inside, you would hope that they were good enough, and they are good enough to handle 3. Like, let's force the guards in the center to take those 2 guys. Now, if they decide that they're not going to do that and they're going to have a free player, so now they have a slide protection, they can deal with if there's a blitzer, they can free the guard or the center to help out with that. Then I think, if you want to guarantee that the offensive tackles, they're pretty good, are going to handle the 2 ends by themselves, then you blitz inside. And you make the center not be in the protection. You've got to pick up the inside blitzer. Now the tackles are absolutely guaranteed to be on their own out there. So I think that you got to do a little of it. As I said, you got to be scared to death of it in a sense. See, I love Richard Sherman. He's not the guy he was 5 years ago. So any of these stop and start routes, like if Hill comes out, jams his foot in the ground, and then takes off again, that's where Richard could have some problems on a stop and start. Because that's not what he does well anymore. He's a good, lanky guy. His interceptions have been while he's rolling through coverage. But if you get him to stop and start, which I think they'll try to do, but the scariest point I've made all this whole morning is that they won without, back to Tyreek Hill. Not only does he not have 100 yards rushing in any game in the 8-game winning streak, he has not caught a single touchdown in the fourth quarter this year. So whenever they've had to keep rallying back, if in fact that is their problem, they've done it without Tyreek Hill catching a touchdown. So I don't know. I think all this sounds great. At the end of the day, there's a lot of weapons. And now I'm being asked by myself, actually, can the pass rush get there in time, or is Mahomes too good for all this? And I think you hear where I'm leaning, towards Mahomes.
Oh, there's no doubt where your lean is, and that always scares me when I go right at Pat Kerwin with these things. You know, I've asked this of a lot of people, and I just want your assessment of Garoppolo, because I listened to different interviews. But, you know, probably listen to more radio this week than I normally do because the interviews are so spectacular by everyone. And the quarterback I gets the blame, but to me it's going to be a game that Jimmy G's in a weird spot because it's basically being set up that if the Niners lose, it's his fault, but if they win, it's because of defense and running. How underestimated is Jimmy Garoppolo in this game in your estimation?
He is underestimated because you can't talk about him without bringing up a comparison to Mahomes. And in a sense, that's almost not fair. You don't have to be as good as Mahomes to win a Super Bowl. And Jimmy's a pretty good player, so he's had this little dry spell where they don't need to throw, so they're not throwing. And some have made the assumption because the head coach is afraid to let him throw. And that's not the case. Go back and look at the Saints game. He's had a couple of 300-yard games. They will call pass plays. We got to be careful about thinking, well, their formula is 45 runs and 10 passes. It has been something in that area for a little while here, and he hasn't done a lot in the postseason, but they call, for the whole season, they call 30 pass plays a game. And everyone doesn't, and every time I ask anybody, guys who play, like, hey, how many times do you think San Francisco on average calls pass? And they always say the same thing, 20, 22. They said, no, 30. And so that always stops me in my tracks as well as others, and you got to think about that. They're going to have to throw this time. They're not getting away with how they won the other games. Not because, you know, their run game's going to work. Their problem is staying up with the scoring. Well, here's the big if Kansas City at least gets out to a fast start. Now, David has picked Kansas City, and I bet you the one thing he's worried about is a slow start again. Because if you get out to a slow start against these guys, their formula of defense and running the ball is absolutely a bad deal for Kansas City if they're down 24-0 like they were 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, I expect a bomb in the first series of the game from the Chiefs. I think they're going to want to move those safeties 5 yards further back. I think they're going to want to scare the Niners, and I think that Andy Reid's tired of calling plays from behind.
Pat, so I know you're taking Kansas City. By how many, and how big's the score going to be?
Well, I like the over just like the two of you. It was good to see that you agreed on that part of it. You know, but here's the problem. I liked the over last year, and I remember saying it on this show. And then we saw a defensive battle, which turned out to be a great game to watch if you love football. But I see firepower in this one. If you look at the average scores of these two teams all year, it adds up to 61 points. And they're giving you the over at 53. I think the weather conditions are going to be absolutely perfect. I think we learned that when Kansas City gets pressed, they can go crazy. When not only did they score 51 points in their first postseason game, they dropped 6 passes doing it. They could have been 65 or 70 points. I'll take the over, and I'll take Kansas City. I think one of these teams, Kansas City, I think will be the one gets to 30 points, 30, 28, something like that.
Pat, see you next week when you're back in the 239. Appreciate it.
No, I will be back and can't wait to see you guys. Enjoy the game because I think it's going to be a good one.
I do too. Thanks for everything, Pat. We'll talk to you next week.
All right, boys.